Okay, we got the recording on. The Zoom is working as usual. And McCray's working on some other issues with it, but we're gonna go ahead and start tonight's meeting. So I'd like to go ahead and call it to order. And we'll begin with a roll call. So as I see, we have Ron Evans.
Here.
Schofield.
Here.
Denny Nielsen.
Present.
Ken Woodward.
Present.
There he is. And Tony Moronis. Tony on there. I don't see his name up there. So Tony might not be with us yet. I think he was planning on joining us, but he's going through an airport right now, I think. So we'll go ahead and I'll ask anybody on the board if they have any potential conflicts of interest, if anything on tonight's agenda, if there's nothing that they haven't seen or recognized at this time, but something comes up later, be sure to state for the record at that time. Real quickly, any announcements? My only announcement is I represented along with Emily Schofield here at the COG Awards banquet, and the North Santiam Fire Recovery and North Santiam Sewer Project received a little award. So we were there to receive that along with a number of others on this award. So I'll have it here at City Hall if anybody wants to come and see it. Any other announcements? If there's nothing, then we'll move on to public comment. This is an opportunity to speak before the board. Anybody in the public have anything they'd like to bring before us? Nobody today. Then we'll move on to our old business that we want to get taken care of real quickly here. Consent agenda. We have 3 items on our consent agenda. Approval of the February 5th board meeting summary notes, approval of the February 21 work session summary notes, and our January financial report. Anybody have any comments on any of these 3 items?
I can make a motion on A and C, but I can't on B because I wasn't here.
Anybody want to make a motion on all 3 items?
I'll make a motion that we approve the consent agenda.
It's been moved by Ron Evans that we approve the consent agenda. Do we have a second?
No second.
We have a second. I'm gonna do a quick roll call vote on that. Counselor, but board member Evans,
Yes.
Hall,
Yes.
Schofield,
Yes.
Nielsen. Are we froze?
Danny, which way do you vote?
Aye. Sorry.
Aye, there's an aye. Ken Woodward.
Aye.
I vote aye as well, and I don't know if Tony is with us yet. There he is, isn't he?
Yep.
But he didn't hear it.
Okay,
Did you, Tony?
Came right in to approve the February 5th minutes.
the 5th, the 21st, and our financial report for January.
Aye.
Aye, we have an aye vote, so we have the 7 ayes. Okay, thank you very much. Well, I'm gonna turn it over to Mr. Evans for our treasurer report.
All right, in the month of February, we got 4 invoices. 2 of them were from the COG. One of them is from the local government group, and one was for our government ethics payment. 3 of them were paid. They were all paid with the exception of the government ethics, and it turns out I sent that to the wrong address and just got it back, so I'll resend that.
Okay? Excuse me, work's trying to get a hold of me.
And,
So I make a motion to approve the treasury report for February.
It's been moved. Do we have a second for approving the treasurer report?
I'll second.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. And our new business begins with our IGA for ownership, operation, and maintenance and rates regarding the North Santiam Canyon Treatment Facility and Collection System. Mr. Tommy Brooks, would you like to take the stage and let us know, guide us through this, please?
I would love to, and you want me to sit?
Well, I'm
Oh,
not,
you're just gonna aim him.
I'll move so you can see her, Tony, so that way you're heard.
Oh,
not sure if
Yeah.
I'm not sure if the microphone that they're hearing is the laptop or the owl.
Yeah.
So Tony, let us know. Tony, could you hear Ron when he was describing the treasury report?
Ron was a little bit light, but it seems to be fine.
Okay, well, I'm sitting right next to the laptop, so Tom, or if Brooks would just project.
Project.
That'd be great.
Okay, there's this, I
There we
think it'll
go.
work.
I can hear you great.
All right, thank you, and it's very uncomfortable to be right in the middle of everyone instead of looking at you all at the same time.
You get used to it.
I don't know if I will. All right, just for the record, my name is Tommy Brooks, and I'm part of the team at Cable Houston, who the NSSA hired to assist with the development of an intergovernmental agreement that would basically describe the role that the NSSA would play with what I'm referring to as the Lower Canyon project, which is the first of hopefully 2 projects in the canyon to provide wastewater treatment services. You have before you tonight a proposed IGA that in this form has been reviewed by me and by the COG staff, and it's being presented to you as a proposal. It is open for any and all discussion. It's not a final version, but the idea would be that based on this version, the NSSA board would sort of bless it, I guess, and then run it back to your own cities to see if it's something that your own cities and your governing bodies would approve. I did include a staff report for this IGA that explains sort of how I structured it and the points that are in here, but I think it might be worth going through some of those for the public and for the board. I don't want to do just a full presentation where I'm only talking, so if questions come up while I'm talking, jump right in, and I'm happy to address anything. I thought it was important to start off with sort of what some of the major goals are here. I mean, it's embedded in the language, but I wanted to sort of say, like, sort of what the anchoring points are. And the first of those was because the NSSA hired Cable Houston, we represent the board and its constituent members as they relate to the NSSA, was to come up with something that has a role for all 4 cities. And I think that's consistent with what I've heard in my own work about the 4 cities sort of hanging together, having a role where you can all, you know, advocate for each other, advocate for the region, and sort of work together. So even though the Lower Canyon project's what precipitated this, finding a role for the Upper Canyon cities seemed important, and so that's embedded in there. Another of the goals was to, and this happens, I think, a lot with intergovernmental entities where you come together for a common purpose, but you're also not sort of giving up all your control and sort of turning everything over to a new entity. We're not trying to create a new layer of government here, we're trying to work more efficiently. And so one of the goals here was to still find a way to maintain some local control over your own systems. And that fits nicely in a utility system where you have a collection and a treatment system. The treatment system being something that can really serve multiple entities, the collection system that really just serves one entity. So you'll see a dichotomy in the agreement in that way. The third goal, and this is maybe sort of was my goal for you to be efficient, was to have something that could be replicated if another project happens in the canyon. Whether it's something just like this, that you just sort of change all the words and flip the parties, or something that you can amend to add that second project and really operate everything as a system. That decision doesn't have to be made as part of your discussion of this agreement. But I think it's useful to know, like, well, if I was in your situation or in a different situation, what would that look like? And so I think this draft kind of does that, or at least that was the goal. And then finally, the one that seemed important too was how rate-making is going to work. For an agreement like this, it's still pretty high level. I mean, you're not getting into like, what's a sewer rate going to be? But you need to have some sideboards for how to make that rate and something that everyone can agree to. And as we get into the agreement, you'll see there's other services that might happen. Having all 4 cities agree on what those basic rate making principles are is a way not only to make it good for this particular project, but also to provide some ability to forecast into the future for everybody. And then for that role for everyone, if we're all in it together, this is how we, kind of the principles we want to use in this region. It sort of gives a tool to do that. Any questions so far about the goals of this as I kind of laid it out?
I think you're spot on.
So let's get into the sort of the structure of the agreement with all of those goals in mind. So I guess the main concept we came up with was to have these member classes. So you've got your general member class, your owner member, your owner class, and your user class. The point of having the general member class, again, that's to bring all 4 cities and to have a role and find a role that all 4 entities can play in this. The owner class, kind of what it says for this particular project, would be the entities that would actually own the treatment plant, and then the user class would be the entities that would use the treatment plant. Those don't have to be one and the same. So it's drafted. We actually only have 1 member proposed for the owner class, and that would be Mill City. But then we have 2 members that would be user class, Mill City and Gates. That makeup of who's in which class really informed, I think, the term of the agreement, or more accurately, the termination rights of the agreement. With all things sort of utility related, you have a long planning horizon, 30, 40, 50 years it can be. So we know it's intended to be a long-term agreement. But things change, and there's usually an ability to have an off-ramp to get out of the agreement. But the ability to do that really needs to be the effect of that termination or withdrawal, if someone were to withdraw from this agreement, is really important. So the way we've got that structured is in part to mirror, for everybody, to mirror what happens, I guess what's spelled out in your primary IGA, the IGA that formed the NSSA. And that is, you can get out, give us 5 years warning, and that gives everyone else the chance to plan around that. But then there's a more specific implication once this treatment plan is up and running, because for one entity to get out of that and leave another entity sort of pull the bag, it's not what we want. So we've got a couple different scenarios. One would be where if the owner class wants to get out. The other scenario would be if the user class wanted to get out. And what we wanted to be able to do is to make sure that the owner class still would provide service to the users unless there was a clear alternative that user had. That way, it seems unlikely that you need that provision, but we wanted to have that in there. And then the flip side happens too, that if the user class wants to get out, whether or not they have an alternative, we have to look at the impact of the treatment plant and whether or not it allows the treatment plant to keep operating. And so it really keeps those 2 concepts married until there really are alternatives for either one. Any questions about that? That was a really brief explanation for something that could get complex. That's sort of the major structure. Let me talk about some of the other things that are in here. Let's get past that. I'm gonna say there's one pretty big placeholder that's still in here. I don't think it matters in terms of you talking to the rest of your cities about this. But we don't have a definition of the treatment facility just yet. Eventually we will. It'll be far enough along in the design where someone can say, all right, on this schematic, there's a, something physical that connects to everything else, and we can actually point to that and say, everything on this side of the line is a treatment facility, and everything on the other side of the line is not a treatment facility. That's just a function of the design not being, complete. But when it is, that will be able to get filled in. And there may be a need to have additional discussion around that. That line is arbitrary for the most part. I mean, we can decide where it is. So even if the design says one thing, we can still look, but we need to know what the facilities are actually gonna look like to even have that discussion.
Tony has his hand up.
Tony, what's your question?
Would you mind referencing the pages you're flipping to? You're kind of going through pretty quickly for some of us that are remote.
Yes, sorry, so on the one we just talked about is section 3.1, which is on page 5 of the agreement.
Thank you.
That is where the treatment facility itself is defined. You'll see, I have some words in italics there that says, we'll wait for the design to be a little farther along and then we'll fill that in. The rest of it is structured just to sort of talk about the ownership and operation of the treatment facility. We have sort of all the hallmarks of ownership and operation there, that the owners are gonna, operate it, maintain it, do the regulatory obligations that are associated with it, and then figure out what the rates are to maintain it, to keep that going, and then would charge those rates to the users, which would be itself and to in this case, Gates. Then there's a whole section, this is Article 4, which is on page 6, that gets into the collection system. It really mirrors the prior section, whereas, we have this asset, each city would take care of its own collection system, do all the operations, do all the maintenance, or at least be responsible for it, and come up with rates that it would charge its own users, in this case, the end user, the residents and the commercials. And this sort of just spells that out. From there, though, we move into Article 5, which is what I'm calling ancillary services. And this is just a way to acknowledge that there's a lot of ways that you can operate and maintain a system or an asset. And you can do it with your own in-house expertise. You can contract out for it. You can contract a little bit. You can contract a lot. And it occurred to us that the cities working together may be able to provide those services to each other. So the example I used in the staff report was billing. So if one city already has a system where they can bill their customers, and another city is developing this, collection system, it may be more efficient just to use the same billing system and get some economies of scale there instead of two cities, owning and operating or implementing two different software systems. So I have a list here. This is again, Article 5, page 8, of just sort of the things we would think about that might come along with that. It could be everything from operation and maintenance. So if you don't want to, even though you own and are responsible for operating your collection system, if you would like to contract that with another city, that would be possible. The billing, the long-range planning, regulatory reporting, those are things that are might be very similar between different users, that you might as well try to get some economies of scale there. One thing I have in here, and this is, I think it's mostly to preserve your rights and your abilities to move forward on your ancillary services. And you'll see it a couple different places in the agreement, is how would you go about doing some sort of low-income rate relief program? And there's so many different ways to do that, and a lot of it depends on what the source of the funds are. So you, on the one hand, you might have grants that come from feds or state or other entities. On the other hand, you might actually build that into your own rates and charge your own customers for rate relief within the system. And that's a prudent utility practice that you can do. But administering that then becomes different, because if it's sort of what I call the homegrown version, you're kind of inherently taking on that cost and making sure that the money gets onto your customers. If it's just a grant, you may want to administer that. You may want to have someone else administer that. So what this agreement tries to do is to preserve as much flexibility as possible, not knowing if and when those programs will arise. But there's a lot of different ways that they can be implemented. I think for purposes of all four cities looking at this agreement, I think one of the key provisions would be what's in Article 8, which begins on page 9. And that's where I have the general member class obligations. And so these are the ones that are, some of them are about this deal. Other ones are, maybe broader, like advocating for and seeking opportunities for funding for low-income rate relief. I think that's where, if you're not in the user class or the owner class, your city council might be most interested in what are you actually doing in this agreement. So I think Article 8 is a really important one for all four cities to really pay attention to. And then the last, there's two more. Article 9, which begins on page 10, that's where the rate making principles are set out. And I wrote this in my staff report, but I think if you could summarize all of this, it's the recovery of actual costs and cost causation. So these are publicly owned systems. You're not building in some sort of rate of return to make money off of the system, but you're also trying to charge everyone their equitable share. So,
all right, let me go to the,
if you use the system more, perhaps you pay more. And the idea is not to have classes of the users subsidize each other. And that's what I think is spelled out in Article 9, just with a little bit more detail about the different parts of rate making. And then the last piece I do want to go over is on page 12, and this Article 12 in the indemnity section. Usually in an agreement like this, we might just have one big broad indemnity that says, everyone's kind of on hook for their own stuff. You're gonna fix your own errors. But I think because of the multiple roles we have in this, it was important to sort of spell out the three different categories. So I've got a general indemnity here, and then I've got a specific indemnity that the owner class would give to the other three cities, and then that the two members of the user class would give to the other two cities. And the idea there really is, because this initial project really only serves the Lower Canyon, anything that's about the treatment plant or about the use of that treatment plant really shouldn't have anything to do with the Upper Canyon cities. And so that's my attempt to really put some daylight in between what you're on the hook for and how your participation in this IGA ultimately plays out if there are issues. And I lied, there's one more thing I would like to bring up. This is page 12, Article 13, the first couple sections, 13.1 and 13.2. I was trying to do this agreement so that it would be standalone, but recognize its relationship to the rest of the NSSA. And so I've done that by both saying that this is part of how the cities are implementing the commitment they have in the main IGA, but also that, if you're a user class and you're acting pursuant to this, how do we know that it's the user class making this decision? Well, what I proposed is that each of the parties to this agreement be represented by the two directors that they've already appointed to this board, and that's that's how we'll know that each of the class members is acting and making decisions. And this board would continue to be that sort of clearinghouse for the implementation of this agreement. That is all I planned on going over, besides answering your questions, the questions that anyone else may have. That's the proposal, and like I said, I would like to get it to a point where this board makes suggestions if we need to, that then you can take that to your other bodies.
Did we hear that? So, Tommy's willing to take questions from, the board and then from the audience as well. Obviously, we're gonna wanna take and have a little bit more time to review it. We'll be talking about it some more. I know that I announced to my city council at our last meeting that they're gonna be getting a copy of this, at our next meeting, which is next Tuesday. And I'm giving them until the following meeting to study up on it. I believe I already have you on the agenda for that second meeting for us in March, the Mill City Council meeting. But does anybody here on the board have any questions for Tommy on the draft agreement, IGA?
So, moving forward, this is a draft. What's the process to get the draft to the final?
Well, the final would be the final that all the 4 cities are able to agree to, but in terms of a final that you would propose to say this is the NSSA recommended version,
To the county?
this is the process. And I'm hoping you will provide the feedback to me to say, okay, well, this is now ready to go to your cities.
So we don't have any problem with this right now, this becomes in effect.
I would say so, yes.
Okay, that was my question.
So.
Sorry, I couldn't hear Ron's, he said his response there.
So Ron's question was sort of what's the process of making this a final version? And my response is that this is as near draft as I think we can get without the input of this board. And I'm hoping that through this meeting and whatever other process this board wants, we will finalize a draft that then becomes the NSSA recommended draft to each of the cities. And then Ron's follow-up question was, so if there's no problems with this would effectively become the final version that the NSSA board recommends. And my answer was yes.
Right. So we effectively in the Upper Canyon need to be able to bring along, which is a tougher process, just so you know, and I'm sure you know, signatures and agreements and just buy into this, which the buy-in doesn't seem to be very much from what I've read of it, but it might be, I'm not sure the timeline. I might need some more time to be able to present this and to have buy-in from, the city of Idana.
Right. And we definitely expected that you would need time, for each of the cities. And we just wanted to get to a product where you can say, this is what the NSSA board is recommending.
Thank you.
Tony, I put Tommy on our agenda for our second meeting of the city, second meeting in March, which is the second Tuesday, or the fourth Tuesday, excuse me. And, but that doesn't mean the city's gonna approve it and pass it that night. That's when he's gonna give his presentation. We might need another couple weeks or whatever to actually do it as well. So we're not pushing it. We want to definitely keep it moving forward though, as good a pace as we can.
Yeah, you bet. And Tim, maybe you and I can talk offline a little bit. We, have some other challenges as far as moving things along formally up anyway. So yeah, thank you for the input there. Appreciate that.
Thank you. Questions? Anybody else have any questions? I see Denny waving his hand there.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. First of all, thank you very much for the staff report. I thought that was a nice read prior to reading this iteration of the document. which I thought was well-crafted, well-organized in general. I've had some preliminary discussions with my colleagues on the council in Detroit, and I would be very surprised if we wouldn't be unanimously supportive of the document at this point. I think we all realize that in the Upper Canyon, to coin a phrase, it's sort of a nothing burger for us because we're out some years in terms of being a member of anything other than a sideline participant. But we also agreed that we were going to be part of this in the beginning. We intend to honor that commitment and actually we'll look forward to new technology and movements within the state otherwise that would help us move forward with a municipal wastewater treatment system.
Very good. Thank you very much, Danny. Anybody else out there on Zoom that had any questions or comments? I don't see any hands up or anything, so anybody in the room? Brian Nicholas.
So Tommy, the draft here supposes that for the owner class, so Mill City owning the treatment plant, that Mill City would be responsible to contract with Marion County, since we're the grants administer capital construction kind of entity in the mix, right? We're doing something similar for the user class in that we're also building the collection infrastructure. So gates entirely plus perhaps some, well, definitely some modifications and adjustments to Mill City's collection system as well. So it does seem like warrants some language in there about that, just for clarity.
And you're talking more specifically just during the construction phase?
Right.
Yeah.
So I just thought I'd point that out. It might be something to button up there.
And I think, good question, but I can sort of present that to the board. So I think the question for the board that would arise out of that comment is, do we need to do anything extra for the user class in terms of what that relationship is going to be with the county, like we did with the owner class? Because we have language in here that the owner class will negotiate the final transfer of the treatment system. My initial thought on that is that not all users are equal in terms of what their needs are at the moment. If one user's class has an existing system and another one is going to be having a new system, it would be sort of a weird introduction into at least this agreement that user class has any obligation with the county. I don't think the agreement prohibits the user class from doing that, because ultimately the obligation of the user class is that if you're going to take service, that you're going to have a system, you're going to maintain it, you're going to, charge rates that are able to sustain it, and how you get your system in place seems pretty unique to the individual user. And so I don't know that this agreement itself needs to specify that, but you could at least have some acknowledgement in the agreement, I guess, that may or may not happen. Ultimately, the question comes down to what is the NSSA's role, because this is an NSSA document, in sort of the relationship of one city with the county or with whoever or however it's going to maintain or develop this collection system.
Ron,
Yeah, I was under the impression, I kind of assumed that this document actually, as far as the user class goes, won't become valid until the system is turned over to NSSA, January 1st or whatever it is. Up until that time, it's just a system being constructed through Marion County, that's as far as I know. So in the construction phase, I don't see where the user class definition has an impact, because that wouldn't actually be valid until the system is operational. Or maybe I misunderstood the question.
So in terms of what role a user would play, not specific to this agreement, but in general when constructing the system, there would be a role for the user to play in the commissioning of the system. Because we don't just construct it and then turn over the keys as soon as it's built. We would be doing the system spin up, adjusting to the new flows, adjusting as new users come online and connect. And that's actually built into our project as that, it's gonna be about a 6-month process for commissioning.
Well, the intent is, right now, anyway, for Gates to contract all the services to whatever, either Mill City or whatever entity, and Mill City sets up down for and operate the system. And whatever that entity is, that will, they will have the ongoing operation and maintenance and running responsibility for the system and Gates. So they would be the one that would be, whoever they were, had as their, over their maintenance people, that would be the one who would participate in the commissioning of that Gates system.
So, go ahead. I might be able to help.
Okay, I was just thinking, so you said handing actual over property, so the collection system, so that's where I'd see Gates needs to have that agreement going with Bergen County, because we will own the own collection system, so I think that's where that agreement, when you said user class, would still be something that we have to have, if I understood correctly.
Yeah, it does seem like a worthwhile clarity for the other members of NISA that have clarity on, okay, if an entity is going to take receipt and ownership of a element of the system, that everybody else knows that that entity is going to contract with the county, work out the details, take ownership of it, and are ultimately responsible for maintenance of that system. Even the way the draft is written, Gates would be ultimately responsible for the maintenance of the system. It's just Gates may contract with Mill City to provide that service.
We're gonna.
But under this contract, Gates is responsible. Gates owns that part of the infrastructure and is responsible to maintain it, right? And that, I think.
Yeah, we will.
The county has no question about
We
that.
will have some kind of.
It seems like there's a piece of clarity there.
One thought in terms of, I guess, the commissioning piece kind of sparked something, which is right now the user class has to operate a collection system that is coordinated with the treatment plant, right? So it's got to adopt rules and regulations, it's got to enforce those rules and regulations. Ultimately, it's got to make sure that the effluent that it sends to the treatment plant can be treated. If the commissioning process is a specific part of that, I think that's an addition that could be made to this in terms of the obligations of the user class. One would be to participate in any commissioning process that's coordinated with the treatment plant. And that would at least sync up the fact that one user, it might have a new system that needs to be integrated slightly different than the user who's already got an existing system, if that makes sense.
Yeah, my concern is that we just don't have resources to do that in Gates. If we're required to do it, then we have to add the resources. That's a cost on Gates, and we don't have money for it. So.
I don't think that's what I'm saying. I'm saying.
That's an extreme side of it. I'm just saying
Yeah, however you get that need covered is up to the city, and you've got options, but you've already identified.
We'll have to have another IGA just.
Well, yeah, that's where you
It's
can do right after this.
And it would be some sort of a contract, if that's the road it goes down and ends up on.
But we will have an interface in Gates, and then we have the sanitary commissioner, we have a direct interface with that process. So.
Yeah, it would be helpful to know that, when it comes time to turn over that part of the infrastructure, the collection system in Gates, that, it's understood among the NISA members that Gates is gonna own it, Gates is gonna be responsible to maintain it. It's not gonna be us coming back here to say, okay, Gates isn't handing this over, what's the plan gonna be, right? It does seem to be like, it's a pretty straightforward bit of clarity that you've already clarified it for the plans. Seems like the same clarity for the collection system would be helpful.
So there's another agreement that's in the queue. Per the NSSA IGA with the county, we have to enter and we have to prepare and enter into, or have at least presented, construction delivery agreements. this is all public record, so. And my thought was, and I think, was that the construction delivery contract, now that we know who the owners will be and the users will be, could be completed. I believe county council is working on that. And that would cover the transfer, if you will. And perhaps this IGA could connect to that, refer to that agreement. We had to start somewhere, we started here, right? Who's gonna own it eventually, who's going to own which pieces eventually? What the transfer of the asset looks like as we approach that horizon now needs to be negotiated. But I'm glad we had this discussion. I'm hearing the point, which is the two documents somehow have to link up. Does county council have a timeline when a draft will be available?
No, I think we're waiting for this draft, so we know what we're marrying up to. So
Okay.
I don't think we've put a lot of effort into it yet, but we will during March.
Okay. Do you have, I just wanted to back us up and just say in time, there are other documents that we're working on.
Yeah, I mean, that makes sense, and I think that's, I mean, this board will have to tell me how much they want in here, but, like on the collection system thing, I think it's pretty clear that each city is solely obligated for its own collection system. So in this case, if the county were to turn over a collection system to Gates, that's Gates's collection system, and the other NSSA members would not have any claim to it or obligation to it. And the other end of that is the indemnity section, so we try to put that daylight in here, but I think we can continue to think about if that clarity is needed. But I think the third party agreements will maybe fill in some of the gaps that aren't here, because those third party agreements are just between only one of the cities and not all four of the cities. Right.
Okay,
Well, it would be, if county council's drafting something, a construction delivery agreement that's going to somehow include MSSA as a party versus what Tommy just said, where it's gonna be between Marion County and the user and owner class, that would be helpful to know soon.
No, I think, I think not overcomplicating things by just developing project delivery agreements between Marion County and individual cities. So one between Marion County and Mill City, one between Marion County and Gates. To me, that's the most simple, straightforward way of taking care of arguments.
Okay.
further questions?
I do have one more.
I have a question.
Okay, Mary, what's your question?
Well, a couple of, when I appreciate Brian Nicholas talking about who's gonna own the infrastructure for the collection, because I was like, wait a minute, we do need an owner there, so that's good that you're gonna have an IGA maybe with Gates. And remember that it includes also maintenance, so I infiltration, infiltrate work, repairs, if there's a pump station, things like that. So it's not just, it's all the components of the collection system and how we permit it that's important. And then a question I had is, so I'm assuming that Mill City is going to set the sewer rates, but is NISA going to have, I'm going to call it a surcharge that is paid by Mill City and Gates? Again, because how does the board function if they don't have any money coming in? So I didn't know if the members had to pay a fee, if there was anything. And the reason why I'm talking about that is because if you go for more additional money, the funders will want to know what your obligation is. So again, I don't know. I couldn't tell when you said rates, what were those rates that you were listing in the agreement, and what are they for?
Wow.
Well, I can address that initially. There's three kinds of rates that are contemplated in this agreement. One would be a rate for treatment services. So what the owner establishes is necessary at the treatment plant. Then there's a collection system rate that each city would decide based on its own O&M costs or whatever else, what they're going to have as a collection system rate. Those two together would be generally your normal sewer rate. And then the third time that rates might be developed would be for the provision of these ancillary services. So if one city is providing a service to another, they would charge them for that, and that would be the third rate. But outside of that, there's nothing proposed in this draft for the NSSA board to then impose its own rate on everybody and collect a separate charge, because this is confined to the actual treatment services, which is the collection and the treatment, but nothing beyond that. And so hopefully those two components cover all the costs that would be incurred.
Correct me if I'm wrong, anybody, but in the beginning, we had talked about this owning basically owning the sewer system and things like that. So I think we've kind of morphed more towards the community, or the communities owning their own collection systems, and Mill City actually owning the new sewer treatment facility as well. So we want the board to stay intact, a lot as an advisory board, because we kind of feel like we're all in this together, and we're hoping that that's the way it turns out. If 10 years down the road, the cities want to turn it all over to a one sewer authority having all the ownership, that I guess would be a potential as well. But since we're not able to develop fully both systems, we thought rather than the four communities owning only half of what we have to accomplish, didn't make a whole lot of sense at that time. So I don't know that the sewer authority would really want to charge a surcharge or whatever, but it hit me with what you said. So now you got me thinking, do we, as a board, need some operating funds or whatever capital that we're gonna have to look at? So not something that I had even considered until you put that question forward. So thank you very much for that thoughtful and insightful question. But now you got us all thinking more.
Yeah, I remember Mary bringing that up a couple of times now,
Yeah.
so thank you, Mary. And that does pose a good quandary. So if the board's gonna stay together and we're gonna continue these meetings and we're gonna continue to want staff support and so forth, where does that money come from? Do the cities kick it in individually? Do we do an individual city?
I'm gonna say that's something that we explore more as we go down the road, because we know we're gonna be into this for a couple of years yet for construction and stuff. But definitely something that we don't wanna forget about, obviously, so.
Well, and you would have to have the ability to collect the rates, right? And I can't tell from the work.
Yeah, right now, I think right now we have the authority as, I wanna say a discussion board or something in here, as being able to give suggestion and commentary or whatever, bring forth questions and stuff. But the actual rate setting for the Mill City Gates will be between Mill City and Gates for sure, the final say, obviously. And I think Arthur has his hand up. He has probably some more insightful questions for us. What do you got for us, Arthur?
Well, Mayor, I appreciate that. I don't know how insightful I'm going to be, but I think my question is the same thing everybody else has sort of been circling around, which is this split between the collection and the treatment, the ownership of the collection and treatment systems. And I wonder what you guys think about the sort of different incentives the two owners are going to have there. If let's say, for example, Mill City is not responsible for the treatment, what incentive do they have to manage I&I or to manage nutrient loading? Why they don't? How do you think? How are you guys thinking about that piece? I guess.
Well, Arthur, it will be in the permit that somebody's managing I&I, because that'll be called out. So they will have to have some conversation, because there's supposed to be a plan that you TV every year, so much of your system. So that there needs to be something in the permit that's saying
Sure
who's doing what, for sure. So.
Well, nutrient loading from industrial users could be another example of that, right? And those things are often called out in permits, but if the owner of the treatment system and the owner of the collection system may have different incentives, I guess, is what my question for the group.
So typically, how this might be handled is the incentive, or I guess the lack of incentive is that the owner is going to charge rates that reflect the cost of running the system. And if Gates, for example, doesn't take care of its I&I and it has I&I, that's gonna result in more volume of water getting to the treatment plant, which is gonna make its use look higher than the portion of its use otherwise would. And so the rates it's going to be paying potentially for that are gonna be higher, or it can just go fix its I&I and reduce the amount of effluent that's going to the system. So between the two, I mean, the system's gonna be, if the rate making principles are followed, this cost causation mechanism should track that and give the user the right incentive to run their system the right way. Plus, their obligation to implement and enforce rules that make the system compliant with the permits, and any other regulations. That sort of serves as the other side of that coin.
Okay, so you're gonna turn toward you. Is there gonna be a way to monitor the flows from each of the cities into the system to know what that amount is? Because I think a sewer is just a base rate. Correct, Tim? It's just a base rate. So you're not monitoring how much, pardon me, who's coming out of my house right now. So, I mean, how are we gonna tell what's coming?
The only way we could is just base it on water usage, and if there's an excessive water usage.
Then I don't know how that's gonna connect.
Well, you look at the winter rates, because usually that's when I&I happens versus the summer rate. So you can look at the flows. You will have a flow for this whole city. So you should be able to see it go up if you're having excess I&I. And then you're supposed to be doing monitoring so much of your city to look for those leaks and fix them. Use smoke tests and whatnot that can help with that. So you should have a plan for that.
Our bill doesn't reflect additional sewer
No, but I was gonna
flow,
say.
but it does our water.
I have the privilege of paying the highest water sewer bill in town. And so my sewer does have some sort of reflection on consumption, because my sewer rate is $200 alone, not for water too. So, that's because I own a laundromat. And a laundromat uses a lot of water.
But I think our house rates are all the same.
So
I
don't know how that works exactly. So I think possibly a business or an industrial rate or something must apply somehow by consumption. So that's something to investigate. Brian, you had some.
Thank you. I do want to answer Janet's first question. So the interconnect pipe that comes from Gates to Mill City, it's either it's not going to tag on to the tail end of the collection pipe. It's going to go straight to either a primary pump station within the city or straight to the plant. So yes, you will be able to differentiate Gates' flow from Mill City's flow.
Okay. And well, I was gonna say real quickly, Brian had a question at the same time Mary did. I don't know if we glossed over that or.
No, I do have a follow-on question, but it's a different subject, so
okay.
I don't mind finishing this topic.
Okay, so go ahead there, Ron.
I just wondered about the additional, the only route we've been told right now is that it's exactly that it was gonna tie on the end of the northern collection system. So now we just have to go down to the pump station, come across the bridge, basically tie in there, or go across the bridge, across the river, and go right through the plant.
Yes, one of those two things. Yeah, it's never been a tie on to the Alder Street pipe. It's always been to go straight to the pump.
The bridge across there with the direct connection to the plant is what interests a lot of people. A lot of people would like to have that bridge there as a walking bridge, actually.
Yeah, with all of the cost stresses on the project, we're not gonna be able to put a pipe bridge across the river. It's, that landslide on the north side of the river is proving to be more troublesome than we anticipated it to be. And so we're actually taking a second look at a route that goes through Lynn County, goes across the Sorbent Creek Bridge,
Okay, I
Sorbent
wondered
Street
that,
Bridge,
yeah,
and that way.
because there's a lot of stuff along that right away there.
I'm sure your engineers will figure it out. Mary, you have another question
All
for
right,
us?
so you guys are making me think. The other thing that you probably need to discuss is approving of like development coming in, because again, you're gonna have so much space. And so, would Mill City say to Gates, hey, can't have that development, we have ours going for it. So some kind of conversation about, how do you approve more units coming on board, because whenever there's a new sewer extension, you have to come into DEQ for approval. So having some kind of, I don't know, discussion or something in there that says this is how this will happen will probably be helpful, because again, assuming Mill City will grow a little bit more, just your space and whatnot, is there a certain amount reserved for Gates to grow as well? Or how would you handle it? So just having those kind of conversations about that approval of, because Gates has its own, approves permits and things like that for construction, right? So anyway, having that conversation, do they have to get approval from Mill City if it's for the collection system stuff? So something to think about.
How many more, a lot of it, I guess, is gonna depend on capacity as to how many more hookups are available and things like that. So I think Brian has a possible answer to some of that.
Well, I have a bit of commentary.
Commentary.
I actually like how the agreement's written. It doesn't solve that particular problem. In fact, the agreement doesn't solve a lot of problems. It's very clearly, this is gonna have to take like 2 or 3 steps into final fruition of all the details being worked out, right? I think this hits about the right level. It does obligate the cities to take those actions and to work together to figure out what those final solutions are gonna be. So I really like how it's structured and the language that's used. I think it's a big step forward. It says, like Tommy said at the very beginning, this sets the foundation for some of your final decisions to come, right?
And from my standpoint, I mean, yeah, a lot of the work is still to come. I mean, you have to do long-range planning, but that's in here as an obligation. The users have to notify the owner if there's new connections. That's in here. If you're planning your system and operating your system like you're supposed to, you will have long-range planning, medium-range planning, short-range planning. You will know what's going to come up. That would then feed into your ability to make land use decisions that you make at an individual level, and you're not doing as an SSA board. So it will take some time for this to mature, but I think a lot of the pieces are there to allow that to happen.
Right, I can see this, being some sort of a living document as well, but it won't change a lot, hopefully going down the road, but obviously there will be some things that we have to tweak on it, because forever's a long time, so, yeah. Okay? Brian?
New item.
New commentary.
So the draft agreement is written, it's silent on, it does say for the user class, the obligations to plan and prepare funds, pass take the actions that the cities need to take, including rulemaking, that sort of thing. It doesn't specifically say anything about connection and what standards individual cities will set in terms of requiring at what point in the project or a point of the life cycle of the collection system will people be required to connect to the new sewer system, right? Is it a day one thing? Is it when they sell the property, is it voluntary at first, but the project will pay for the cost if they like to do it right up front? But if they don't, will there be a trigger down the road or a set of triggers that would compel people to connect? The only reason why I bring it up here is because the rate of connection in Gates will affect in the first few years just the average cost of operation and maintenance to all the user base, but also the constituents of the wastewater coming into the plant and the efficiency of the plant will be able to work out and meet its permit requirements. So I know this agreement doesn't solve that or doesn't tackle it yet, but Tommy, could you give us an idea of how you see that being discussed and solved, say, in the coming year?
Yeah, and just to clarify your question, when you said it doesn't govern connections, you mean like basically from a compelled connection standpoint? Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, this doesn't address that. And I guess the reason it would need to is if at the front end, if the volume is important to making the treatment plant run at all. If that's the case, and I guess that's an engineering question I need to have the answer to, which is, is Mill City's volume of waste sufficient to make the plant run? If it is, then I think it's less important to have that in this agreement because, the addition of more users in a whole other city is is great for everybody because you have, maybe the rates go down. But it's from a technical standpoint, it's not necessary. So then it's just an economic decision that we don't have to build around. But if the technical functioning of the plant depends on the volume coming from more than just a one owner class, then we should build that in there. And so I guess I need technical expertise to help me understand that so that this board can understand that.
So my feeling is on that, particularly like in Gates, it would be good to have 100%, but to me, the only way to do that is if there is a low renter payment plan that plays their rates. In other words, so we can go to them and say, yes, you have to hook up, but you don't have to pay for it. And that would be in effect until, change hands owners and the new owners would have to redo that. Now, if we didn't have that in place, then we have to make it voluntary. But then that's where you come in if they refinance it, if they sell it, if ownership changes hands in any way, or a fixed time period, possibly a 5-10 year time period, where it becomes mandatory and you have to pay the full cost of it at that point. That's just my personal.
But since ours is all gonna be just a liquid form, we still have to have that solid point in the plant to make this work. So somewhere along the line, we're gonna have to somehow make that happen, because that's not what we are here right yet. I'm sure we will be. My tank's gonna mysteriously fail a year after it's up and running, so I can come to it. Not joking. But we gotta, I think that's a requirement for this. We can't just do.
Is there a plan for like 100,000 gallon fluid collection system up there just in case everything fails, so you can keep the plant going?
What's the solids?
No, you can't do that.
No, these plants are designed not to fail, in that way.
Yeah, and you can't prevent that much.
So, that DEQ, okay, gotcha.
But to help explain the technical aspect to your question, it's not a question of volume, it's a question of the constituents. It's just Mill City system is designed to separate out those components before sending into treatment, because that's what the older plant required. The new plant actually needs those solids.
So that will appreciate Gates.
So what happens if Ron in a public meeting on Thursday with Marion County asked a great question, which was, we know that the project is a little short funding wise. What is the plan, or will you, can the design, if we don't have enough money, what's the phasing of the design? And so Ron asked this great question, which was, if you don't get enough money, which phase are you going to complete? And I think that is actually, that helps the conversation and helps answer the technical question for Tommy. Engineers are wonderful, smart people, and they always have a plan B or plan P, as this Like, okay, so what, if you do not have enough funding to complete the gates portion of the project, how are you gonna tackle the technical issue here? And how does that, and the reason I'm asking that question is because it is going to inform whether that is in this agreement or not.
So there are multiple, there's always multiple contingencies, they're never great, you never wanna use your plan B and avoid it. One short-term consideration that's always been a possibility, and we've looked at this in terms of our commissioning phasing as well, while those gate systems are getting connected, is if we had to track it from individual Mill City step picks. It's a very expensive way of doing it, but in a very short term, it can be used to keep the plant health in check. That's actually how you often jumpstart a new plant. So that's something that can be done in a very short term. There's other approaches like that that could be used to get it through a little longer. But they're very unfavorable compared to the baseline plan.
So which I'm gonna say, not as a board member, so I'm gonna step out of my board member and I'm gonna step into city council, is we can't afford those rates just for Mill City to do it. That would put our rates way too much if we're the only ones contributing to the sewer system. Okay. I'll move that. I had to say that because you already know I'm gonna fight if it's too high.
I probably would drop support as well if the rates become way too out there, but we do have to do something.
Yeah, I'm aware of that, but I'm just saying that that's,
Right.
I will be in opposition at council meeting. Just being upfront, I've said it before.
And do you have, I'm looking at Tommy, this is Laura speaking, sorry for those of you that can't see us, the L for some reason is rotating to the screen, so I'll just announce when I'm speaking, and if we can all do the same, that'd be helpful. For those online, do you think you, I guess, have what you need to, do we need to build that in?
We can build it in if this board gives me that direction to build that in. I mean, that's what I'm looking for, is the kinds of things that you think will make this palatable and work for your own cities and for each other. So if having in there the compelled connections makes it work, I can add that in.
It strikes me the other way to do this is we'll know on March 11th if we have, where our funding gap is. And a little bit later in the agenda, Ron and Emily have the opportunity, which I realized I didn't tell them, sorry. They'll have the opportunity to talk about how they're, oh, there's the owl, owl's working now. To speak to the outreach that they are doing in their community. So that, what I'm offering to the board is you may want to hold on making any more revisions to this agreement, in part and get it in front of your cities and see what other changes your cities may have. And then bring it back before we look at that particular question. I would offer that as a pathway forward, not to say that we wouldn't incorporate that change that Marion County, the engineers are saying should be there, but rather to keep us moving in our process, get it in front of the city council, see what other revisions there may be, let Gates City Council ruminate on their compulsion decision in light of the March 11th special session results. It may be, there's a lot that will happen between now and the 1st of April. Okay, yeah.
Go ahead,
I'm sorry.
and just for clarity, the reason why that struck me was, as I read through the draft agreement, it's got, planning, capitalization, funding, those items covered, and it's got development and implementation of system and development charges. But it seems like is this, it doesn't I don't expect city councils to solve, in the next 2 months, compel and connect, that's not gonna happen.
No.
But passing or, enacting rulemaking that's essential for the financial operation of the enterprise, seems like it's a hole in the sort of the obligations of the parties. At least I didn't see it in there. That's why it jumped out at me was. Seems like there's a key word missing there in that list of obligations.
It's like, something like sewer SDCs, I don't know what Gates has for sewer SDCs, do you have any SDCs? So you charge it there, so SDCs would be important, because Mill City does have SDCs for that, so system development charges, to help pay for things in the future. So we would have to have that in our intergovernmental
Yeah, a
agreements
couple
too,
percent
so.
or something else.
So whatever Mill Cities, and I would say they have to charge basically an equal SDC for sewer, because everybody's gonna be in the sewer together, basically, I would say. But then how that also gets sent back out, paid back out too, will have to be somehow in the intergovernmental agreement and in future projects and stuff.
Maybe it's already covered and they just, I'm not.
Yeah, there is one section, it's 3.43, and that's where under the treatment facility operation and maintenance, that the owners will adopt rules and regulations governing the quality and quantity of wastewater that can be received by the treatment plant. I think that's the primary control for, like, what do the hookups have to look like? I don't know that excludes volume as being one of those factors that we will take in, we being the owner class, whoever that is, would take in as long as it's a certain volume, constituency, everything. I think it goes into the rules. And then the flip side, the user has to show that it'll basically adopt similar rules that dovetail into that, and that it makes use subject to those rules. So I feel like it's there without knowing what those rules need to be from a technical standpoint. So mechanisms here to make that happen.
Go ahead, Tom.
Yeah, maybe it kind of bigger the question, what happens if one of the councils, or like Gates, for example, the council just gets a proposal and all of a sudden says, well, we don't have a fixed number, what it is. When we get a fixed number and they said, that's just too high, we ain't gonna sign that, or we don't. When do we have that option, or and if we do, when does that go away? I guess is my question. When can we say, we don't think this system this is too much for us? Do we have that option, actually? Just say you gotta do better, or are we already past that point?
That's a good question.
That is a great question.
Yeah.
So the agreement takes care of that. To understand, sorry, I'm looking at Tommy, and Tommy's not jumping, so maybe I'm misunderstanding the question, Ron. What I'm hearing is if Gates decides that the rate that is being set is too high, what is your avenue to dispute that? Yeah, so.
Oh, I didn't hear dispute, I heard not participate,
Yeah.
on the front end, which.
Disputed, so I don't know if this is the right place for that, but if we sign this, do we sign away any rights we have to objecting to rates? I mean,
No, not to objecting to it. I mean, that's, in fact, we tried to build in a participation process where as the owner is determining what the rates are gonna be for the next fiscal year, they give you notice, and you come in and you scrutinize their rates, you make sure that they're doing the rates that are consistent with this agreement. And if there's a dispute, that you can come back to the whole board and make your case that they're.
yeah, I guess that's my point. If they said, no, this is the base rate, this is what it's going to be, then we have to accept it. We don't have, we're.
If it's a rate that conforms to these rate making principles and is based on their actual costs, yes, you would be accepting it.
And that's
the cost of service.
Basically, we're committed now under the original ORS 190 to do that. Is that what you're thinking?
Well, that's kind of what I was thinking, but I don't know if you're the legal schmiegel here, so.
Well, there's still an appeal rate, so you
Right.
can still appeal to all four cities, but they would be based on this agreement, but they would be, their review would be very technical. It would be, what are the actual costs of the plant? And if it's.
Yeah, the words too high has different meanings, right? There's
Well, yeah.
too high because you feel like people aren't gonna like it. There's too high because it actually seeks to recover costs that shouldn't be recovered.
Yeah.
And this agreement is gonna look at the latter, not the former.
Okay. Yeah, I think that's sort of.
Okay.
That's a good question.
Ann, you got a question?
I do have, my name is Ann Carey and I'm public from the city. And I don't know fits in this format or not, but when you're addressing rates, how are you addressing the 1.3 bonded debt we have? And if we get the plant in, we'll have 2 more payments on our bonded debt, which lowers back to 700,000. How are we handling this as far as our rates? Or how does it fit into your rate assumption?
So you're just talking about the existing debt, how
The
it fits
bonded
in
debt,
there?
the sewer bonded debt that Mill City has.
I have been fairly adamant throughout the process that our current debt needs to be resolved before we take over the ownership of all this too. So it is my intentions to see to it somehow, and I know that folks have been asking and looking for ways to, I just want to say forgive the debt, but to get rid of the debt. Yeah, that's a big concern of mine
Big
as well.
concern because you're piling on more debt for the people in Mill City and the rates.
Well, they would be
If
on a
that
race
comes
for
to that.
everybody that hooks up to it, so, yeah,
That's true.
yeah, so.
Thank you. I
Yeah.
just want that to be
No,
considered.
we're considering it.
We haven't.
That's a good considered.
Yeah, we haven't forgotten that either.
Thank you.
That was one of the points that was actually brought up at the commissioners meeting, when they had the 3 commissioners.
It is a big point.
Yeah, I just, like Ron said, I just brought that up at a commissioners meeting here this last week, so.
Thank you. Thank you.
So, yeah, I'm pretty adamant too that that needs to be figured out before or during this process. Obviously, we got a long ways to go yet. Other questions?
No, I just like to say I feel like I'm being a total witch with a capital B. I'm not. I just like you, I'm looking out for Mill City. I understand where Gates is coming from. I really do. So I want to say that.
These are big steps, they're complicated steps, and they can be expensive steps, so we gotta do our best to be stewards, that's what we're figuring. Brian, you had another little commentary.
Yes, just commenting. I have my questions answered, so I just want to make sure that, I don't have any unresolved questions here, so.
Okay.
If the board chooses to forward this on to city councils, for first look, all for that. I don't want my questions to be like a damper on, the board's decision here about where to go with next steps.
But we can find you if we need to ask you more and interrogate.
Well, I don't know if there's anybody else that have any questions, but as I stated earlier, it is my intention to release this to our city council at our next meeting. If the board here, thinks that we're ready for all that, I do feel that we are, so I don't know if we need to, do we need it?
Is there,
board
well, I guess I have a couple of questions to just make sure that we are either advising something or not. I guess the one question that came up was about NSSA having any kind of like other surcharge or anything like that. I heard the discussion, but I guess we didn't really talk about that in terms of, what the NSSA's funding normally is, and do you have the ability to?
Well, I was actually wondering if the administrative charges for the plant could include the advisory board and the services. So the rate that gets set, if maybe that could include it. So there isn't a mechanism right now, other than the COG funding, but I wonder, and this was actually, thank you, Chris Ima. Chris Ima texted that to me and said, maybe the NSSA could be funded. That could be a decision for the board at a later date.
Under our original charter,
Yeah.
it's to pursue a sewer system for all four cities.
Mhm.
So we're still doing that charter until actually Detroit and Adair get complete. So potentially we could get funding just through additional grant monies from Marion County to pursue that same, what we've been doing
But if
now until that is complete.
that's not an option, then what do we do? We do probably need to talk about something.
We need to fund it, but maybe we need that, so I guess my question.
Yeah.
I'm thinking that the sewer authority wouldn't need any, the project isn't going to generate any money for a couple of years down the road yet, so we still have a little bit of time
Yeah, we got a few more years to think on that.
Yeah, we
But I
got
do
time
think
for that.
it is important, and I do think there's basic administrative services that the board will need. The cities probably aren't going to wanna supply, you know.
Yeah, I think most of that would go into the operation maintenance program.
Depends on how much that rolls to the citizens.
Yeah.
That'll be our telltale. If they tell us where to go and how to get there,
Yeah.
maybe we won't go there.
So, yeah, but you're.
Chris, you had something you want to add there?
Just to comment to that, a while back, the project has provided some financial information and projections that were typical of utilities. And that included when we talked about administrative costs. That administrative cost wasn't just the billing system. It was also, you know, oversight, advocacy, those type of things are kind of factored into that when it's the role that administration typically plays with the utility. So that's what was the basis of those numbers we gave you.
Okay.
But heard a figure of 195,000, when we got the 80,000, there was 190,000 that said it was towards supporting the O and M organization, or whatever it was, to build up to the takeover. And then I mentioned that in the meeting there, and Danielle said, no, that's for everything, that's not just for supporting commissioning, so it's just, I guess there's a money there, funding that's coming through the pipeline to support NSSA.
Well, I know what Danielle put together was some years ago. So the latest numbers would be in the facility plan. I just have to go back and look at those.
This was in conjunction just a couple months ago.
Oh, I'm sorry, I was talking cost, not.
Yeah, this is when the $80,000 grant for our legal services, they said also at that time there was $197,000 additional money to support the NSSA's cost in ramping up to the takeover. Maybe I misunderstood.
I believe we did some rough estimating of what that cost would be, but haven't put a funding source to it. So as far as I know, there's no funding sitting out there.
Okay, so I misunderstood that then.
Right.
No, yeah, we're just projecting costs.
So, okay, so Tommy, do you think that there's some stuff that you need based on conversations to add into this, or?
No, I was just trying to double check and see if anything specifically language wise. I think the issue, sort of call it issue spotting, as you presented to your council members, I can prepare a few points of sort of the questions we got or other things that we know are sort of coming down the pike, so that they have the.
Because there could be some more input from the individual city councils as well, so it's like, how many draft revisions have you hear more before you do for the fund? Okay, so, with that, I guess, the board, do we have to have some sort of consensus on whether to release this to the cities, or just move forward, because it's already basically public information now? And like I said, I told my counselors that we will be looking for a draft on our next meeting this coming Tuesday.
Would you like me to propose some sort of motion or something?
Should I? Yeah, would you? That'd be great.
So I think a motion that, basically, I was gonna get the word, I want to say adopt, what would we say?
Recommends.
Yeah, a motion that this board recommends to each of the member cities, this draft agreement, but also to direct your staff, which would include me, to prepare a cover memo that can go to those cities, explaining the conversation that happened tonight. And I think between those two things, all of you would be able to go to your governing bodies and say, here's the NSSA recommendation, and here's some thoughts on it that we heard at our board meeting.
So, are you making a motion as not part of the NSSA board?
No, he can't.
No,
Told us what to say.
I was proposing a motion that might be useful to get us to the end of this meeting.
Okay, well, when you say you're making a motion, I'm confused.
Oh, he was proposing, he was suggesting language for a possible motion to be made.
All right.
So moved.
Oh, Danny.
And
Jesus.
Denny so moved, do we have a second?
Yes.
And we have a second, so thank you very much.
I'll abstain. I'll abstain.
What's that?
I'm abstaining.
Mine.
Okay. Well, all in favor then, say aye.
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 Hey,
Aye.
Opposed is one. So
I don't think he's opposed, I think he's abstaining.
is that an abstention or an opposed?
abstaining.
Abstain, okay. So motion passes with one abstention. With that, I would recommend that, everybody take the opportunity to show this to your cities, not as something that you have to have some lengthy discussion with, but show it to your counselors, let them read it, let them form questions, ask questions, things like that. So the more time they have to review it, the better the questions they'll have for us. So
Is this version available online?
This version was emailed to you on Friday afternoon. And if it is not already posted on the NSSA website, it will be soon.
And the comments, I guess that would be good too. Memo.
I think it's all in.
Yes, the staff memo was also part of the packet. What I understand Tommy's preparing is, an update to that memo, based on the conversation this evening. Tommy is available, and I, and anyone else, of course, that would like to attend one of these city council, we are available to come to your city councils and present this. So Tommy has continued to say that he's, happy to do that. I think that we have one on the calendar for Mill City. So if the other cities, Gates, Adana, and Detroit would like a presentation, similar to what happened tonight, we're happy to do that. To walk through what this says. Happy to do that remotely or in person, even along nice pretty drive up to Detroit or Adana.
snow will be melted by then.
Yeah. But happy to do that, just need to get that on the calendar. In order, just a point of order, you do need to present, now that the NSSA board has recommended that this, be presented to city councils. In order for the NSSA to meet its obligations under the amended IGA with Marion County, we do need to present it to the city councils at least. There isn't an obligation that the city councils adopt it, but it does have to be presented. So let's just to be clear about that, and so that's why, and we're available to come help present that.
So go back to your respective city councils, and they will be asking to be put on an agenda at one of the soon to come upcoming meetings. Who do we have? Denny, you have a question?
I'm not sure I heard all of Laura's remarks. We have a city council meeting a week from tomorrow night. So I would appreciate having an updated draft sent before this Thursday so we can share it with council, with the council agenda, which will be published on Thursday afternoon for discussion the following Tuesday.
Denny, my only other remark was if you wanted Tommy or I or anyone else to come present that, either virtually or in person, we're happy to, just let us know.
Thank you.
And I would like to prepare a new version, just for no other reason than to, put it in the footer, some designation that this is what came out of the NSSA board. And also I have to fix one error, because my advertising skills were a little off on 2 words, so I'll move those around. But I would like to have a version that you then send to your city, and that'll have the new cover that you just authorized. attached to it. So even though you have, for all intents and purposes, this version, I would suggest you wait till a new version gets sent to
So
you.
you built the lower roof, okay, good.
Will I have that by next Tuesday?
Absolutely. In
Thursday.
fact,
Thursday.
before then, yeah.
Thursday.
Thursday.
Denny has said Thursday.
Okay.
I wrote down Wednesday.
Good. Okay, so out of the 5 items on the new business, we've just finished 1, and we've got a half an hour left. So I'm gonna take this now, moving forward to our Marion County update. We have Chris Imo.
For the record, Chris Imo, Marion County Public Works. Just giving the monthly update on the sewer construction project. I've got a bad print here. Did I borrow yours? I've got a bad print of helicopters.
Absolutely.
Somehow my words
Would you
are
like to borrow my glasses?
Okay, no, I can, I just wanted to.
Just good?
Want to double check that I didn't miss anything.
Okay.
Thank you. Yeah, so, recent progress on the project. First of all, we've done some survey work. So we've completed the survey of the ODOT right-of-way in downtown Detroit. That's for the, proposed, state surplus to use for septic easements. So now we are moving into the environmental clearance phase, and individual property owners will start to get questions from our environmental consultant, so they can clear up the environmental permitting side. And we'll be going out in the field to do cultural clearance, and then taking that to the next steps with ODOT to propose easements for them to grant to those property owners. We have finished, I touched on this last month about the long lead equipment. So we finished identifying the long lead equipment for the main treatment plant. So this is not uncommon in large municipal scale water and wastewater treatment works, that some of the parts can take 18 months up to 24 months to acquire in some cases. So in order to meet our deadlines, we need to start selecting those and placing those orders fairly soon. Right now, the biggest ones is, of course, electrical. There's a lot of controls. There's a lot of parts that go with the automation, as well as the big generators. It can take up to 2 years. Some of the pumps, and then the actual treatment reactor itself. So we are now in the process of working through those amendments with our CMGC slated, so that they can actually procure that equipment. And then the another point we just finished was a work session with the city of Gates. So that was our delivering some of the information that NSSA has requested us to provide, which was a couple things. One was just to deliver information on the current status of Gates septic systems. So the ages of the systems and what's the outlook as far as what they would have to do for future systems to get those under code. And then the other piece of information we gave was a more detailed explanation of how we use EDUs. So our engineering master plan and most of our documents use the equivalent dwelling unit. You see this a lot. Our EDUs is it's really a measure of flow, and it's about the amount of flow that one typical house generates in one day. So the actual gallons it represents depend on kind of where you are. Different systems all around the country have a different value for that, but it's what is used as a base user. And that's important for Gates's considerations as we're working through this agreement, and with all of their work with possible connections, is how do we allocate those costs when we're not talking about just individual connections? Because each connection can be a flat rate, but you wouldn't necessarily see the same flows coming out of one single family home as you would a multi-family connection, like an RV park, a manufactured home park, even apartment complex sometimes have a single connection. Businesses, laundromats, sort of thing. So, as you see, they all tend to result in different rates. So, that's kind of what we talked about, is exactly how do we come up with EDUs and what's the basis. So we presented that, and we gave that to NSA staff as well for you to use in your advocacy. So I think the main thing was we walked away, hopefully we're all on the same page as far as what exactly is an EDU and how do we use that in the utility world. And then now on to the actual construction of the plant itself. We're on site. We just finished our geotechnical survey of the soil conditions on WPCF site. Next step in that is we're actually going to construct a pilot infiltration basin on that site. So it's like a miniaturized version of the future RIB. And we're just going to use that to basically put tap water into the basin and measure how it impacts the water table. So
Do you need a permit for that?
we'll be working with
Put tap water into the ground?
we do actually.
I figured as much.
Yep. So working through
That's
that.
the 3 basin rule.
Well, it's a small enough discharge for study purposes, but it is, we'll work with Mill City on it.
Good.
And, also we will be using your water, by the way.
We'll charge you.
We'll see what we can look up. But that's actually pretty cool to prove up our model, because we have a pretty sophisticated computer model of how this system will impact the water table, but we want to get some real world field data to prove that up. So looking ahead for March, first of all, March 10th would be that's the date we're all watching for the legislature's funding to give us some idea. I mean, we've already heard from them that the current ARPA reallocation is about 75 million. And our request would be about a third of it. So let that temper our expectations a bit. I mean, we don't know exactly how much we'll get until they announce it, but we know we're asking for a pretty sizable piece. So, but of course, we're all continuing to look at all other funding sources as well. So, but everyone, please keep your fingers crossed for March 10th.
Actually, they're talking about Thursday.
Oh,
We'll see.
maybe Thursday.
For my sanity, Thursday.
So everybody keep your fingers crossed for Thursday, so Jenna can get some sleep. The WPCF, so permit submittal. Our last step is just, we have to do one more land use compatibility statement for Marion County. We did one for Lynn County, but the treatment system itself has portions of Marion. We're gonna get that, and then we'll be administratively complete. And then we'll be looking at submitting our WPCF. I expect it to go in sometime in March. But I'll come back to this board and update next month if anything changed. We have a meeting, we've already had one, I should say, but we're having more of a technical follow-up meeting with the city of Salem to talk about this. First of all, talk about our WPCF and everything we've done in support of that. Salem was pretty involved through the master planning process, everything we did going back up to 2021. That's when the master plan was formally issued. And so since then, there's been just a lot of work, particularly work on the potential RIB sites. So those 5 sites we evaluated, we want to make sure we're giving Salem a full summary of all the work that's been done so far. And then, not unrelated is our future update, what I've called before the belt and suspenders approach of trying to create a pathway for a federal permit that the system may one day need to operate under. So we're working on our petition for a rule update. It's still in process. We'll come back to NSSA when it's ready. I already talked about the pilot infiltration basin. So we'll skip that. I put on here for this change. I put on here, we'd be going to the contract review board. We went back and looked at the rules again and looked at our past, action we took with the contract review board. It looks like we were kind of covered by that last action. So that should speed things up a bit. So you won't see contract review board, but you will see when we take the next amendment to our board session, that would be for purchasing the equipment. Also looking ahead for March, would be an amendment to our engineering contract. That's gonna be for the 30% design. So that amendment 7, we expect will take us all the way up to the point where we are ready to execute a contract for the construction. So in other words, the GMP amendment, that's where Sladen will actually give us a guaranteed maximum price to build everything that's in the project scope. So amendment 7 is going to get us all of the engineering design needed in support of that. I will just say, it is unusual to see a GMP on a 30%, not probably a lot for people not in the alternative procurement world, but it is a very aggressive timeline. So that amendment is going to include the actual water pollution control facility design itself. Again, up to 30%. So it'll be a strong concept design. I think it'll be like that thick, not that thick, but it'll include the pipeline design. As I talked about before, we're still in the alignment stages right now, so that's kind of the pre-design planning. This will take us all the way through to where we actually have a line in the ground that can actually be located and say, this is where it's gonna go. It'll be the Gates collection system design. And we're gonna go ahead and include our independent cost estimator in there as well. So that it's another construction professional who's looking over the contract prices. And I also mentioned this too, that just a heads up for Detroit, those property owners may get some calls from our environmental consultant. We kind of let them know as well, but if they start getting calls from SWCA, that's part of the process for getting that ODOT planned. So that's it. I know we're short on time, but I know might be some questions.
For the board to note, of course, the board is aware of the regulatory landscape that you're working in for this facility. You'll note that item 4 is that the county is pursuing a rule update and will be petitioning the DEQ for a rule update for an MPDS pathway. There's a process to that, and now that, especially that Mill City has been identified as an owner and Gates is potentially the user class, it would be helpful if the county could engage NSSA by sharing a draft of that petition, a draft of that language. Of course, NSSA has its own counsel that could advise them on the language that's been chosen, an opportunity to comment. So if the county could provide that to us, that would be helpful.
I'm hoping we'll have a draft by Friday, maybe. If not, it'll be early next week. But.
Thank you.
Further questions? Further questions for Chris? I don't see any hands up out there in the Zoom world.
I would say on the petition to change the rule, there will be a public process. So we have 90 days when that hits our desks that we will do a public process. So again, again, you can look at it early, but just so you know, everybody, that there will be a chance for anybody to comment on that petition to change the rule. So.
Okay, thank you. All right, Chris, well, thank you very much. Mary, you're next on the agenda for a DEQ update.
Yeah, so we are, I've seen the draft comments on the facility plan, and so we're just finalizing those. We were thinking it would probably be best to have them show up right after session, but anyway, we're finishing up our comments on that, and then that'll go to the county and Keller, and we'll have a discussion back and forth about what changes need to happen to that report, and then that'll set the stage for them to move into the design work. Is usually after you finish your facility plan. So, and that also opens you up to seek other monies if you wanted to seek money from Clean Water State Revolving Loan Fund, or if you wanted to talk to USDA. That facility plan report, when it's finalized, is one of the documents they need for seeking that funding if you so choose to do that. So it's a big step.
Thank you. Does anybody have any or questions for Mary? Mary's for questions. Questions for Mary? Anyone out there? No, thank you very much. Sounds good. And we also have anything with our board persons, Ron Evans and Emily Schofield, where I attended also a meeting that was held with Marion County. I presume that's the reports that you were going to talk about.
So as Laura stated earlier, she did not inform us that we would be on the agenda.
Right. I love it when that happens.
So I will say that after our meeting with the commissioners, the city of Gates has on the first sent out a survey to our constituents in the water bill. There are flyers in City Hall. And so pending the feedback from that survey, may have a open house for the city of Gates to find out if there's any further information that they need. So that we can move forward with the compulsion there.
Right.
Decision.
When you get the final version, Chris, then we'll set a meeting with the council to a couple of weeks to make a presentation of that. And we get that in place, so we can notify Laura.
Yeah. Yep. That's what we have.
That's good. No, you're actually doing well to have a information pack going out to the community, the citizens and stuff like that. I hope that we'll be able to follow up sometime in the near future too, to do the same thing. But I know that you guys are in the hot seat, and we appreciate all the work you're putting in there.
You're welcome.
Staff report.
I just want to highlight one thing in the staff report, which was that NSSA received an award last Wednesday night. Did you want to speak to that?
I think,
You're not in.
I mean, he did.
Yes. Okay, I'm not sure if everybody caught that. We've had other members join since then.
So not only NSSA received the award, but each city also.
Yes.
So the city of Gates, Mill
Right.
City, they're all listed on there. So we have a plaque like that to go into Gates as well.
So if you didn't attend, though, you didn't get a plaque.
It's for your collaborative work. It was so the Council of Governments holds an event every year, and there's awards given out, and the chairperson's award is to recognize regional collaboration. And the council chairperson chose this year the North Santiam Fire Recovery Collaboration, which included Marion County, the Long-Term Recovery Group, each of them 4 member cities, NSSA, Santiam Hospital, thank you. And so what I didn't know until Monday night, which is why you all got that, or whenever that last minute email came. And I didn't exactly know what you were going to, what was going to happen, but it was very hush hush, but I was told, send an emergency email to the NSSA board and invite them to this dinner. And also that flagged for us that we had not enrolled you in our COG Connections newsletter. And so each of you will likely receive the COG Connection newsletter from now on. Yeah, okay, Emily's not.
I get it,
You get it,
actually,
okay.
so I knew about the event
Okay.
long beforehand.
Okay. So we will, if you haven't seen that Cloud Connections before, you'll see it now. Once every couple of weeks.
Every 2 weeks.
Every 2 weeks, so
This
you'll,
Thursday.
this, thank you. And happy to answer any questions about the staff report, but other than that, I'd turn the time over to you, Chair.
Does anybody have anything else? I don't have anything. So, oh,
Sorry,
more.
breaking news, I have great news. You do not have to have an audit this year, you are under the limit. So if you recall, I was sort of waiting for that before I put your supplementary budget process together. I was confirming that because you're under the limit of expenditures for the year, you don't have to do an audit. So Denny, specifically, you were speaking to the cost of the audit, you don't have to do an audit this year, so we will take that into account in your budget. So, yes.
Now that you said that, because I keep forgetting to do it, the SEI filings, we all gotta do that for city council as well. Do we have to do it for NS?
I'll look into it.
I thought, I
think
can't
so.
remember now if we did both or not.
I'll look into it and get back to you.
Okay, and my memory just doesn't,
Yeah.
I could
Good question.
dementia or something, setting there.
Okay, so unless somebody has any further questions, comments, we're gonna go ahead and adjourn 7 minutes before deadline, so very nice. Thank you everyone for joining us tonight. We'll meet again soon.
Thank you all.
Bye-bye, thank you.
Bye-bye.
I get asked the chair.